Last week, I spoke about developing a daily rhythm of slowing down by stopping, listening, observing, and worshipping. And I believe that it is so important for us to be able to pace ourselves and slow down as we travel through this frenetically fast-paced world. I think our digitally distracted age is robbing us of the ability to be present with God, present with others, present to the good around us, and even to our souls. And so today I want to build upon last week's talk of slow and talk about the key element of that, which is silence and solitude. Luke 5:16 says this: "As often as possible, Jesus withdrew to out-of-the-way places for prayer." Jesus regularly practiced silence and solitude. John Mark Comer, a pastor of a church in the States, defines it like this: intentional time in the quiet, to be alone with ourselves and with God. So firstly, silence. Simply put, it is just to have no noise, both external noise free from distraction, but also the gradual learning of no internal noise. And I'll come on to that in a moment. And then secondly, solitude, to simply time away from others, to be present with God. That's different from loneliness, that's different from isolation. It's the conscious, active choice to be present in the presence of God. And so as we read the Gospels, which are the accounts of Jesus' life, we will notice this pattern that Jesus regularly withdrew from being with people to spend time alone with God. He tended to do this early in the morning, although that's not a rule. If you are not a morning person, you don't have to feel guilty about that. But he tended to do it by a lake, or finding a quiet spot on the mountain, or walking through a garden. I wonder what it might look like for you to, as often as possible, to withdraw to out-of-the-way places to pray. Maybe a park near your house, maybe some time in the New Forest. Maybe it's a particular spot in your house, or even a particular chair, or for some of you, it's time away from your little ones when they're either asleep or cared for. Wherever you can find space to be free from the many, many distractions and the noise of our world, to be by yourself in quiet. You know, even if you take out the spiritual element of silence and solitude, there is still a huge physical, emotional, and mental benefit for you to spend time in quiet. And you know, we all feel this on some level. You will have experienced these kind of surreal moments of silence or peace. I don't know if you've ever been outside after there's been a load of snowfall, and you walk outside and just the world is so quiet. It's just simply peaceful. It feels like the world is on mute. For me, it's any time that I'm lucky enough to be around mountains. I feel this real sense of quiet. You know, it amazes me like how epically big these things are, yet they're so quiet. They're just still being mountains. I feel, as I am surrounded by mountains, I feel myself slowing down. I feel myself relaxing and becoming calmer. So without the spiritual aspects, there are benefits, but silence and solitude is different to mindfulness and other New Age practices that are incredibly popular right now. For it's not just simply the emptying yourself or your mind of the stuff. It's also intentionally inviting the presence of God into your inner world. Because we live in this digitally frenetic and frantic, fast-paced world, there is a danger that you will speed through life and never take the time to tend to your heart or your soul, that we'll never go beyond a surface level interaction with ourselves. And what time in silence and solitude does is it slows you down to be able to hear what the Bible refers to as the still, small voice of God. It is to simply let yourself be loved in the presence of God, to be known by him. You know, we live in a competitive and an achievement-based culture, and so silence and solitude, letting yourself be loved and known, is unlike anything else you're going to do, because there is no gold standard for this. You can't kind of gain better levels of experience and get kind of gold stars for doing it really well. Frustratingly for me, I can't win at silence and solitude. It doesn't fit with the way that I see the world. It is simply being still before God. No agenda, no to-do list, just simply being present with him. And so as you enter that space, as you enter that quietness, what you might start to notice is that your inner world, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions will start to get a little bit louder. You might find that you start to replay scenarios from your day over in your head, and you might start to input some of the things that you wish you would have said. It might be that you fantasize about the life that you just long to be living that's not your reality. It might be that you start to fret about your concerns about the past or even the future, and sometimes that is going to feel overwhelming. Zadie Smith, the multiple New York Times best-selling author, calls this the raging chaos from within. And you know, if you feel this, if you feel some of that chaos, that is completely normal. Don't run away from this. Rather, invite God into that chaos. You know, being still before a gracious and a generous God who knows you better than you know yourself is the best place to address and to give attention and even to process some of those thoughts, some of those emotions, some of those feelings. Much rather you experience your disappointments or your frustrations in the quiet, in the presence of a loving, generous Father, than you blurt them out uncontrollably towards someone that you love, saying something that you didn't really mean. It is because that we have this raging chaos within us that we need to slow ourselves down in silence and solitude. We slow ourselves down to the speed of love, to the speed of peace, to the speed of joy, all of which are slow. Here is why the practice of silence and solitude was so important to Jesus. It was the source of his power. We see this really surprising thing said by Jesus in John 5:19, where it says this: "Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does." Jesus gained his strength, his energy, his wisdom, his purpose from regular moments of connection where he withdrew to be present with God and present with himself. At the start of Jesus' public ministry, he's baptized and then he is led into the wilderness. The same word there can also be translated as the quiet place. And so after 40 days in silence and solitude of the quiet place of that wilderness, he's then tempted and tested by the devil. It's this test of his will, of his conviction, and of his character. And in Luke 2, 3, and 4, it says this: "He ate no food during this time that he was in the quiet place. and he ended his 40-day fast very hungry. And it was then the devil started to test him. You know, I've always thought that word then in that sentence there was a warning for us. It was a warning that when we're at our most tired, our most weak, and our most hangry, that we are most susceptible to giving in to temptation or acting out of our weakness and our brokenness. And I believe that all to be completely true, which my life is a living testimony to. But I also think it's to misunderstand what Jesus was doing in the wilderness. It's to misunderstand the point of the quiet place. Yes, he was hungry. Yes, he was physically weak, but spiritually and emotionally, he was at his strongest. The then is there to show us that rather than being at his breaking point, but he was actually at his strongest point, ready to take on the test of his will, the test of his character, the test of his convictions. And he was ready because he had spent time in silence and solitude. He'd spent time in the quietness of God. I wonder what it is that you are carrying Start again. I wonder what it is that you are carrying around in your inner world. What burden are you carrying? What voice of negativity? What experience that is haunting you? What anxiousness? What worry? What decision that you need to make? What dream? What anger? What resentment? Bring those burdens to Jesus as you spend time in that quietness. Let him speak his life-giving, his affirming words over your life. Lean on him. Receive the gracious gift of his love for you in those places of quiet. You know, this is attainable for everyone. Jesus isn't looking for perfection before you start. It's why we call it a practice. A practice is something that you practice, that you learn in and that you grow in and that you develop over time. I watched a film called A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which I would highly recommend doing. Tom Hanks is in it. And it's this film about the impact that Fred Rogers, the beloved American TV kids host, the impact that he had on the people around him. And in the film, Joanne Rogers, his wife, is being interviewed by a journalist, and she's asked this question: what is it like being married to a living saint? And I just loved her response. She says this: I don't like that term because it makes him seem unattainable. He has a few simple practices that he sticks to every single day. He spends time in the quiet reading scripture, he goes for a swim, and he prays for people by name. Other than that, he is just like you and me. The practice of slowing down into silence and solitude is not unattainable for you. Yes, you will have to work at it. And yes, sometimes you'll even have to fight for it as the pace of life tries to drag you away from that place. But I believe as you develop this rhythm, you will start to hold on tight as you discover the power and the freedom and the joy of becoming quiet in the presence of God. So, how might you do that? I want to leave you with 3 rhythms for you to consider as you start to practice silence and solitude. And they are this: divert daily, withdraw weekly, and abandon annually. So firstly, divert daily. Can you slow yourself down each day into the speed of love as you practice stopping, listening, observing, and worshipping as a response? Listen back to last week's talk or head to the website for more info. Could you develop that daily rhythm of entering the presence of God each day? Then secondly, withdraw weekly. Could you build into your routine a time each week where you're intentionally setting aside space to practice silence and solitude, maybe for a longer period of time? Could you go for a walk by yourself? Could you sit in the garden for an hour or two? Could you set aside some time on a morning of a weekend just to simply be still? Let God be with you, love you, and spend time in your presence. You know, since the start of the year, every Friday night for 24 hours, my phone is off and away in a cupboard. And you know what? It is my absolute favorite time of the week. I'm less distracted. I have more energy. I am more present with myself, with my family, and with God. I would highly recommend trying to build in a weekly rhythm and habit of withdrawing and free from noise, free from distraction, and intentionally entering the presence of God. Where could you do that this week? And then thirdly, abandon annually. You know, as we approach the summer, and although that is going to look very different and it's going to look quite strange this year, could you take some time off to get a decent rest? Could you consider booking out a day, or maybe even starting with half a day, just to be by yourself in silence and in solitude? We do this a few times a year as a staff team, where we spend half a day just by ourselves and in the silence and in the solitude with God. And you know, the overwhelming response from our team is that they love it and they want to do it more, but also I want them to do some work. Could you consider retreating at least once a year to get some time away to do a kind of a spiritual MOT with Jesus? Divert daily, withdraw weekly, and abandon annually. You know, it feels natural now as I finish for me to leave a bit of silence. And so as we close, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to read a short prayer, and then I'm going to leave some space for us just to be still. Maybe it help you just to close your eyes, free yourself from distraction, and just intentionally invite the Spirit of God to speak to you, to be with you as you become more aware of his presence. So I'm going to read a short prayer and leave some space, and then we're going to go back into worship. Be silent, be still, alone, empty before God. Say nothing, ask nothing. Be silent, be still. Let your God look upon you. That is all. God knows. God understands. God loves you with an enormous love and only wants to look upon you with that love. Quiet, still, be. Let your God love you.